don't get so preoccupied with a timeline, whether it be your own or others. You know, it's okay to let life just happen and to enjoy it. You don't always have to be chasing the next thing. I wish I would have told myself that. Ultimately, I'm happy with where I ended up, but I feel like it would have alleviated a lot of the stress and shame, which is so, like, I hate that I felt ashamed that I didn't have like a real job, basically. Yeah. But I guess it prepared me for now because I'm content creator. So people will be like, get a real job. And I'm like, well, listen, I've been told to get a real job for like 20 years now. So.
Joëlle, welcome to Cast of Creators.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. So glad you're here.
So excited to meet you and that you're here. Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, I can't wait for our conversation. Who knows what's going to happen? It's already so much has transpired. I can't wait for more. Yeah.
So where are you from originally?
So I was born in Barrie, Ontario, but I don't feel like I have a hometown because my dad was in the military, so we moved around every 2 to 3.
Casey,
is your dad in the military?
No. The outfit. My God.
Dad?
Yeah.
So I didn't. This is not an ode to your dad, but it could be.
Really? It's here in the notes.
Yeah, so my dad was in the military, so he moved around a lot. We lived in Germany. We lived in Ottawa twice. We lived in, I don't know, every small town in Ontario.
Wow, you lived in Germany for a bit.
Yeah, it was when Germany had the Canadian base out there. So I feel like any military brat of the like 80s or early 90s was in Germany because that's where everybody was kind of met. And now we're all over the place. But yeah, but when I think of a hotel or a hometown prior to Toronto, I lived in
Freudian slip.
Not quite over there. I say Ottawa because I went to high school there. Okay. So I feel like high school, university, formative years, that would be my hometown. Yeah.
So you have a lot of experience sort of leaving a friend group, or at least a couple times, and then sparking up a new friend group.
Yes, yeah.
So what's the first time that happened in your life, and what was that like?
So it must have happened even prior to my memories because we were moving around so often. The first time I can remember it is I think is when we moved from Germany to Kingston. And I must have been maybe 11 or something. Okay. And I remember I was a very shy kid. Like I could not speak to people. I was very shy. And I was just lucky that I always had like a bossy busybody that would be like, you're my friend now. And I'm like, okay. And then I would just cling to that. There you go. I could totally see that dynamic happening. So I remember that. And then after, the last move was, I can't even remember from where, to Ottawa, but that was in grade 8. And I remember that being a really hard move. Yeah, I would never recommend somebody moving the year prior to going to high school. That's when I was like, okay, I don't love this. But yeah, so that's when I came into Ottawa. And I did love Ottawa. I made some great friends there and I stayed there for university. But I feel like because I've lived so many places, especially small town Ontario, that's why I love Toronto so much. Because when I moved here, which was for work, I was like, oh my, I'm never going to leave. I'm like, this is amazing. Yeah. Like, I didn't think people like could be so, like there were so many things to do and see, and it was like endless. So I was like, I'm hooked, and I've been here ever since.
Wow. So you were in high school and in Ottawa.
Yes.
And then you stayed there for university.
I did, yeah.
And then you made the shift. So what did you go to school for, and how did you get to Toronto, and what was your profession at that time? Like, what were you after? I
went to school for social work. I started off my major in social work. I did a placement. I quickly realized social work wasn't for me, which is why I think it's too young when you're 16 or 17 to decide what you want. I don't even think I knew what a social worker was when I decided to go into it.
Social working gets pretty grisly.
It does, but wait, I go into it gets more grisly.
Okay.
So then I was like, I can't do this. So I finished at the major in psychology just to kind of end university. University wasn't my favorite, to be honest. And then I was working as a waitress, and I was like, doing the thing where like you work for a long time and then you travel, kind of thing. And eventually people were like, okay, you need to figure out what to do. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right. And I had like literally no idea what I wanted to do. So I was talking to a cousin's friend. She's like, you know what? You should think about becoming a funeral director. I think you would like it. And I was like, oh, I'm like, I've never even thought about that.
You know, but it's like, I know what I'm going to do.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
So I was literally like, I think it was after a shift and I was at home and I was like, I'm like, and I remembered that conversation. So I literally opened up the yellow pages, like which they had at that time. And I like looked at the funeral home, like the closest one to me. And I called them and I was like, hello. I'm like, I'm interested in becoming and working in this. Can I come visit you? And they're like, yes. They were so desperate for people. They're like, do you have a suit? I'm like, yes. They're like, come tomorrow at this time. And then I started working there. And then before I knew it, I was in school. That's what brought me to Toronto, is to go to school for funeral directing.
Wow.
And that's why I was here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you would liven up. You'd bring a lot of sunshine to a funeral.
Yeah,
I hope so.
Like, you put the fun in funerals.
Yes,
That's
yeah,
right?
It's true.
Yeah, you
That's like
really would.
everyone's slogan.
Yeah, I bet everyone says that to you.
It
They
was,
can't back it up, though.
no, definitely
But
not.
I'm sure you could.
I could try. Yeah, we have some stories for sure.
Yeah,
So how long did you do that?
I did it for a long time. So I did it until I started my blog while I was doing like while I was a funeral director, and then transitioned out of that into what we know now, basically.
Yeah.
But in like its infant stages, like before, I don't know, TikTok or anything like that. Yeah. So it's like a crazy transition. But that's what like ultimately got me to Toronto.
Yeah.
And I loved the industry. And it's funny, like everybody I feel like that works there has like a bit of a screw loose upstairs. So everybody is very funny, very affable, a little nutty. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So people would say, they're like, it must have been so depressing. I'm like, it was a lot of the time. I'm like, but it was also really funny. You know what I mean?
There's sort of like there's humor running through it, because if you're not a little bit funny and you can't make light of everything, it just gets too heavy and you can't bear it.
That's
basically.
it.
You end up with a lot
true.
of funny characters.
Yes, it's true. A lot of like, people who just have like a really sick sense of humor, basically, is the only way I could describe it. So that's how I ended up here.
So you started writing your blog.
I did, yeah.
And what were some of the initial topics and things that you wanted to talk about at the beginning of that?
So even though like everything was pretty funny and stuff, it did get like really, really depressing. Plus, like I don't think people understand with funeral services, it's a really intense job. Like,
I was going to ask,
physically.
like, what is it, before we get to the blog, like, what is it like?
It's a lot of organizing and like speaking to people and people skills and like trying to make people comfortable, but also trying to organize this like huge celebration in like sometimes 24 hours, sometimes like a month. It depends on the culture. You have to be very like culturally sensitive to certain things.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of moving parts. So that's why it's like such a high stress job, and not necessarily because of like, you know, the heavy topic it deals with, but because of like, it's just a crazy job. It is just, and like, it is such a prehistoric industry that like everything is done in person, like paper, faxes. You need to bring this like to Toronto. I was in Brampton at the time. Like, it was just insane, like how much went into it.
Right. It's all hard copy sort of stuff.
It's all hard copy.
No, like Uber for funeral.
No, maybe there is now. I don't, I doubt it. But everything is like, it was just, it's so much moving parts and everything. And so you kind of like have this like camaraderie with everyone. So you're all in the trenches together, but it's a lot. It was like 50 hours on average. And that's not including on-call time. So you'd have to be like on call for like families who like lost a loved one and were confused and they wanted to speak to a funeral director. Yeah. So it was just like, it was kind of like too much. At one point, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. It's like so stressful. It's so like heavy. And I'm like, I just want something like light in my life, you know, like something superficial. So that's where the blog came in. So I was like, I would love to. And I read like your blog, I read Gracie's. I loved all the Toronto blog scenes. So I was like, I want to do that too. So that's where that started.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
And what was your first thing that you wrote? Do you remember?
Yes. So I started off the blog as like a 30 things to do before 30. So that was like
a nice way to start.
Yeah. So
I looked at that post today.
Oh,
actually.
did you?
Yeah,
I was looking at that the other day too. So I was like, oh, it's so funny to me because now I'm like pushing 40. So I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, how funny. Like, you really don't know how much time has gone by, right? Yeah. But yeah, so it's that's how I started. I basically just wanted an excuse to do it because I was really embarrassed to tell people that I wanted to do that. Because to me, I was already too late, which is so funny to think because it was like 2013. But I'm like, there's already bloggers. They're already there. Like, I'm embarrassed that I even want to do this. So let me have like a little excuse to do it.
Yeah.
Knowing that I wanted to do like cover a bunch of other stuff too. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. It's funny how, you can perceive the perception of timing is so strange.
It is strange.
Because you think you're late, but you get older, you realize you're real early.
That's so, and it's even when I look back to when I decided to be a funeral director, when I was like, I can't do this waitressing thing forever. Like, what am I going to do with I was like 22 years old, so
right.
Like still a child.
I know. When I look back, I'm like, what were you thinking? Like, it all ended up working out, but it's so funny. You're right. In hindsight, you're like, you were so young and you were thinking you didn't have enough time, but really like, everything worked out.
What would you, if you had something to tell your 22-year-old self, what would you be saying to her?
I would say, don't get so preoccupied with a timeline, whether it be your own or others. It's okay to let life just happen and to enjoy it. You don't always have to be chasing the next thing. I wish I would have told myself that. Ultimately, I'm happy with where I ended up, but I feel like it would have alleviated a lot of the stress and shame, which is so, I hate that I felt ashamed that I didn't have like a real job, basically. Yeah. But I guess it prepared me for now because I'm content creator. So people will be like, get a real job. And I'm like, well, listen, I've been told to get a real job for like 20 years now. So I know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you're at it long enough that now it basically is a real job.
It is real. Yeah.
Caught up.
Totally, right? So there you go.
One of the things I was going to say is like when it comes to thinking like, oh, it's too late. Or I had someone say the other day to me, oh, I want to start a blog. I was like, just start. Just start now and do it. It's like, you're not too late. It's like, do you think that, let's say Meryl Streep isn't concerned about the new hot actor of that year? Like there's always going to be, it's like acting. There's always going to be new talent and new people coming on the scene, but also, there's other people who have a legacy that have been doing it longer, and there's enough room for everyone. You can all appreciate each other. Like the internet's not too full of bloggers or too full of TikTokers or too full of anything. It's like, just get out there and do something.
Absolutely.
I remember there's a Nike ad that said, tomorrow you'll wish you started today.
That is so true.
And it's like,
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And it's like, why wait? Why put off till tomorrow what you can do today? Just get in and do it. Like, even if your first blog post is like super shitty, like my first blog post.
I would love to see your first blog post.
I used to draw like CG cartoons on a computer. It's like, I started my blog in my first job, and my boss like went away to Florida for a month, and I was like, and I just started posting like, the idea was people, places, things, and thoughts as a way to keep more memories. So I just started like writing like, I don't know, ding dong posts about what I did that day.
I love that.
That's where it started. And that was 200 years ago.
But you did it even before there was like an established group of people.
There was no Twitter. Twitter wasn't invented yet. So I started in 2005, and then I only had like 2 people read my mom would read my blog, and I get like random Google traffic because I had some keyword, but it was not, nobody read my blog for like the first 2 years. Like, and I didn't care. It was a diary for me to document what I was doing. And, and I didn't care. And my friends made fun of me, and it's like a joke between a couple of friends. Like, they'd always be like, hey, loser, why are you coming out to the bar? You're going to stay home working on your blog. And they used to make fun of me. And I'd be like sitting on the couch on Friday night, like, like writing my stupid blog.
Yeah.
And, I'm just glad that I kept it up and was consistent, even though no one was really going there. And then when Twitter, came to be, that helped a lot of people. I connected with like-minded people who were like maybe doing the same thing or like thought it was cool. And I was like, I found my people. And and then the rest is history.
It's so interesting. It's interesting to me where it's like, I almost feel like it was easier to be like, to persevere at it. Well, you started much earlier than I, but even in 2013, because there wasn't like a business or there really wasn't any like gratification towards it. So it's like, if I got a comment that wasn't my mom, I was like, oh my God, again, famous. Like, I'm doing it I was so excited, whereas now I feel like that's why people don't persevere, is because they're like, well, I'm not getting contracts. I'm not getting free stuff. I'm not getting like the followers, the likes, or anything like that. So it kind of acts as like a deterrent almost, where it's like, you really have to just focus on doing it because you really love it, you know, and that's going to get you the perseverance. And I feel like when a lot of people are like, how to make it in social media, which changes all the time, but the one thing they leave out is just perseverance, like doing it for long enough. It's like the most unsexy like tip, right?
Consistency is like
but
content is this is that. No, actually the real thing is consistency.
Totally. And just loving what you do and like finding something that like makes you happy outside of like what you're getting from other people, which was easier back then because we got nothing, you know?
And I remember telling people, like, if you want to start a blog or you want to start any of your thing and your goal is like, I'm going to make this Instagram because I need to make I want to make money, or my TikTok to make money, or my something to make money. If that's like your main motivator, you're probably going to quit and it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So like if you're not doing something that you actually really, really find fun and you like it, you're not going to stick at it. And if money's the only thing that's driving you, then like get a real job.
Totally.
You know, because you're not going to be satisfied, because if you're just going for that, you're not going to be creating the type of content that makes you happy, and you're going to probably give up.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, when you say real job, you really mean
like a 9 to
employee.
Yeah, become an employee, or like
a 9 to 5 employee.
Yeah, get a 9 to if money's your main motivator, make sure you have a 9 to 5 job that's going to pay your bills, and then maybe try the thing on the side. But don't just dive into being like, quit your job and have never done it before, and then say, I'm going to be a influencer or a blogger or something, and then expect that money's just going to come to you, because it takes a lot of work, you know, and it takes a lot of dedication, time, and that consistency.
Totally.
And like, it doesn't just happen overnight.
And you're depriving yourself of the joy that can come from this, where you're doing something like just for yourself, you know? So it's a shame if you were to go into it for that mentality, because you very well could make it, but you're not going to enjoy the process as much.
Yeah. And then if if maybe that's your only thing and you start making money, and then you're depending on, you have to keep doing that stuff just to make the money to pay your bills. Because I remember, I had started, like, I was completely freelance and I was full-time content creator, and I hadn't really taken on clients. And there was a period where I was like, I guess I have to take this brand deal because otherwise I'm not going to be able to pay my rent right now. Right. And then that took even more joy out of it, because I was just like, I have to do this, because it was like, it wasn't necessarily like authentic and fun and really me, but because that was all I had going on at the time. Yeah,
you're right. You have to love it. Otherwise, it's like, what's the point of quitting the situation that you like didn't like to work for yourself, to ultimately hate it, to like then be in the same situation, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So walk us through the transition from having your 9 to 5 and getting into blogging, and then blogging sort of gradually becomes commercial enough that you have confidence that, hey, maybe I could sort of crossfade over 100%.
Yeah.
So what does that look like, and how do you navigate it?
That was a really long process.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's years probably.
Yeah, it was. So I started in 2013, my blog, and I quit my full-time job in 2017, I believe. So
yeah.
And when I quit my job, like it wasn't like super lucrative, but I was like, I feel like this could be something, but that was tough. So basically, I started this blog when I was in funeral service, and it started to, like, I loved it so much. I loved like the interaction, and I started to meet people in Toronto. That was the one thing that I'm so grateful for, like this industry and my blog, because I met so many amazing people. Because Toronto, I will say, is a very difficult place to make friends. It can be, it's almost too big that, like, to try to find your people takes so much work, right? Because you have, like, I had lots of friends, but I felt like I didn't connect with anybody on a different level. And it was tough, like, because I didn't grow up here or anything.
Yeah.
But then when I had the blog, I started meeting other people who were also beginner bloggers, and we kind of like formed together, and we would help each other out with content and things like that. So I was like, oh my gosh, I have these friends. And then it opened up a whole lens to the city. So I got to like go to different events at a place I would never have known. So it was so incredible. So I became like kind of addicted to that. So I felt bad because my love for funeral service was like kind of going to the wayside. So I was like, this whole other world exists and I would like to be a part of it.
Yeah.
So when I was like, okay, I think I want to start pursuing this seriously, I knew I didn't have enough Like, I don't think I was getting paid hardly anything at all. So I knew I had to get another job. And the thing about funeral service is you don't, like, it's not a 9 to 5. It's like a 8 to 7. It's like a, like, I don't know, 1 to 12 midnight. Like, so it was too much to try to do it. So I was like, okay, I have to go and transition out of this. So I worked at another company downtown Toronto with the mindset that I'm like, I just want to blog. That's really all I wanted to do. And I'm like, I just want more time to blog. I can't be working the 50 hours, you know what I mean? The like on calls and everything like that. So I worked for this like small company. And then I started to get a little bit more in contracts and like money. And I was like, maybe I can do this like as my job. But the insecurity kind of crept up. And I felt embarrassed for even saying that because people were like, it was so new. They're like, oh my God. They're like, there's no future
how
in
are
this.
You make money? This isn't going to last. Oh, this is just a fad.
The bubble's going to pop, blah, blah, blah. So I felt embarrassed by that. So I was like, no, people would be like, do you think you'd do it full time? I'm like, oh my God, no, I would never do that. Even though knowing that I really wanted to. Yeah, I was just so embarrassed. And then finally something clicked where I was like, you know what? No, I actually really do want to do this. Like, I really, really want to do it. And then I started to tell people that I wanted to do it. And I swear, like from the second I started telling people, being like, yeah, I'd love for this to be my full-time job. It's like everything went into overdrive and things started to like really progress. Like before it was just like a little bit. But then as soon as I was like, no, I'm going to do this, it was like, boom. And I feel like it was because I made that intention. So pretty soon after that, I started to get a little bit more jobs. So I went down from full-time at my little office job to part-time to try to like kind of balance like making like rent and stuff like that. And then eventually they were like, listen, like we can't do you part-time. Because I was like, don't worry, I'll just work part-time, but I'll do my full-time role in the part-time hours, no problem. And then I did that for like 6 months. They're like, it's not working. I'm like, agreed. They're like, you have to go back full-time. I'm like, I'm not going to. So then they're like, well, then you're fired. Well, not really. They're like,
we're going to let you go.
We're going to let you go. And I was like, okay. I'm like, I guess this is it. So that's how I ended up doing it full time. So it was like half my choice, half not my choice. But I feel like the second I was like, yes, I do want to do this is when like things started to happen. So I kind of opened myself up to like good things happening, I feel like.
Do you know what? I had a very similar type of thing when I had worked full time at a IT recruiting company in like the financial district. I wore a suit every day.
Oh my God,
carried a briefcase.
I can't see that.
I had like no tattoos. It was like, I don't know. When I look at her, I don't even know that girl. But my boss called me into his office, like, hey, and I had my blog, and I would like stay after work to like print out stickers with my URL on them on Avery labels. So I would give them to people and I would stick them all over the city because like I would want to be blogging all the time.
Yeah,
I
like
loved
an addiction.
it. And then my boss was like, Case, you know, like, what's going on? You know, you don't seem like yourself. And I said, I don't want to work here anymore, but I need the 2 weeks and I need the money. He goes, you know what? You can have the 2 weeks so you could be done today.
Oh, that's so nice.
And then I was like, okay, well, now what the fuck am I going to do? So I went over to Hemingway's, and like the owner there is from New Zealand, and so is my family. And I was like, can I have a job? And they said, we're not hiring. And then the next day they said, can you work tonight? And then I worked there for like a few months. And
amazing.
Shortly after that, I had a job, and then I ended up applying to Much Music and MTV, and I got my first social job there, which it was exciting, but I just wasn't feeling that job anymore. And I wanted to do, I knew that this new thing there was something coming, and I wanted to be part of it. And I just didn't want to have that regular boring job anymore.
Yeah, it's like once you figure out what you want to do, it's like anytime not doing that, it just doesn't feel right.
And it eats away at you.
Yes.
It's like you need to go confidently in the direction of your dreams and then like not have doubts about it and just, you know, really go for it. Because like your doubts will be the thing that hold you back from opening those doors. You need to like say, nope, this is what I want to do and I'm going to do it. And look out, here I come. And tell people about it, that you're excited about it. Because otherwise, if you're like, oh, I don't know, I might do this, people are going to be like, well, I don't believe in you, so don't do it then.
100%. Yeah. Or yeah, it's true. If you're like, well, no, it's not going to work out, so I'm not going to do it. People are like, yeah, I guess it's not going to work out. Yes. You know, it's like, yeah, it's incredible how much like confidence can like inspire confidence in other people. I feel like I wish I had learned that earlier in life, but now that I kind of have a handle on that, it's like things have changed for sure.
Yeah, there's very few extremely successful people who are like meek about their projects. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't think you go too far being like meek about your
Yeah.
project.
It's easier socially, right, to be meek because it's like, I feel like, well, I always say,
yes.
Yeah, it's like, because you always feel so judged.
You don't want to like gloat. You're like, yeah.
Right. But the people who gloat eventually
Or have
end up
confidence.
succeeding for sure. And it might take them 10 years or a year, you know, but they eventually end up getting there because they're so convinced.
Well, self-promotion can be done in sometimes distasteful ways.
Yes.
But if you can find a vein to do it in a way that is palatable,
Right.
it's definitely worth doing. But it's you know, you gotta figure out what works and what
I guess
doesn't, and
there's
it's
a fine
different for it's
And
different
I'm sure
for
we've both seen the other side.
Yeah,
exactly, and it's different for everybody, and it's different within the context of every project in a sense.
Totally. It's more just if you have excitement about like something or yourself,
Excitement is good.
anything, you know, it's like excitement is really contagious. So it's true. It's like if you're meek and you're like, yeah, you know what, it's not going to happen. Who cares? People are more comfortable with that, you know? But if you're like, I love this. Yeah, people, even if they're naysayers, will start to kind of like get a little like riled up about it too.
You end up attracting confident, happy, excited people too. So it's sort of quite a nice way to do it. If you want to do a weed out of people, okay, show up excited about something that you're doing, okay?
It's so true.
You'll start to weed them out.
Yeah, it is true. That's so smart.
So walk through a couple of those first clients, those first jobs. Like, what are they looking like for the blog? Not you don't have to name specific names, but like what's the engagement like?
So in the early days, a contract could be like $200, $300 basically. So you'd have to do a lot of them to actually be able to make your rent. You know, I was really lucky. I have to preface. So we were married at the time. So my husband and I lived together. So we split our rent. So that helped a lot. I don't know if I could have done it in the early, I know I definitely couldn't have done it in the early days if I had to pay for rent all by myself. So yeah, I basically picked out like and it would be like, hey, can you do an Instagram post for $200? I'd be like, yes. And
Instagram was already a thing when you started.
So Instagram was already a thing and around 2017, but it wasn't like what it was today. But it was, so people would, that's what it would be, and sponsored blog posts as well. So if you wanted to write a blog about something like that, and there was very little work, but there was also very little of us in the industry. So it was kind of like whatever came your way. I'm like, sure, what are we doing, you know? And I didn't have any concept about like usage rights or like paying for time or anything like that. So
perpetuity.
Not at all. Oh my God. I could have like photos somewhere in the world and I wouldn't be able to do anything about it because I just didn't know. But a lot of them didn't even have contracts. It was all so like,
Lucy.
Yeah, it was.
It was the Wild West. There was no rules. And around that time, brands were just getting into like, first they were like, why would we pay you? It's social media. And then they got to the stage like, okay, we'll pay you. But it was like, here's a couple of
literally like $200. And if you got, you're right. If you got those $200, you're like, yes, this brand pays, you know? It was but like I took on so many contracts where they'd be like, yeah, come in, like you're filming something quick for like a couple hours and you'd be there for like 14 hours and it would be so intense and you have like no recourse because there's no contract, or if there was one, you just signed away all your rights basically.
Yeah.
And you're doing it for like very, very little money, but you're just happy to be able to do it. So I didn't feel taken advantage of or anything like that. But when I look back now, I'm like, oh my goodness, but that was just the way things were, you know, I was just happy to be able to make my share of rent so I could be doing this full time. And then I feel like once Instagram really started to take off, that's when things like took off heavily as well.
Yeah, paying your dues is a thing.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah.
Like you end up having to do it in most industries. And even if you're a lawyer, you have to really pay your dues, but you're getting paid, but you still treat you really.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
You're like a grunt. Okay, so the name, the Petite Noob.
Right. If I would have known that the blog was going to be like eventually my career, I would have maybe thought a little bit harder about the name.
I like the name.
Oh, I'm glad you do. I like it now.
It's like a small beginner.
Yes, exactly. So that was my whole perspective. I'm like, I'm a noob at this.
Yeah.
And
you're shorty. We're
5'2". So I was like, let's do this. And I thought it was like kind of during the age of like big the blog. So it's like cupcakes in cashmere, like I don't know. So it was like
I think it's
something
a good
and
name.
something.
I think it reminds me of like a bit of a Dragon Slayer mentality.
Yeah.
Like meaning because, you know, it doesn't matter if it's a true to stature thing. When you enter industries or when you take on challenges, you can feel small relative to the challenge.
Right.
So I think it's, you know, holds true. I think it's great.
Well, that's interesting you say that. That definitely reflected my mentality. It was like I felt like I was going into this already established huge thing, embarrassed already. So I was like, I'm just like a little beginner. Don't worry about me, guys. I'm just here to like, you know, kind of like mess around a little bit and see what it's about. So that was like my own, again, like my own like way of like making sense of it so that I can actually go forward and do it.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's incredibly identifiable too, because I think everybody feels that way when they're taking on a challenge.
100%.
So, I mean, on the opposite side of the spectrum, you're basically like a know-it-all brazen. It's like, no, I don't know what the opposite side of the spectrum is, but maybe that person is, you know, gone off a cliff.
Who knows? Yeah.
So, okay, so then your focus turns to Instagram.
Right.
And you get on Instagram. And how do you weave your blog into it? And how do you sort of bring all that together? Are you selling now a brand on placement in both? And what's that like?
Yes. So it slowly progressed as it like continues to progress. But the way for me, it was like, okay, it's your blog. We want a sponsored blog post. Then it turned into like a sponsored blog post plus an Instagram. So it was always like that. And then eventually I remember being like, oh my gosh, this is new. When I got my first contract, they're like, we just want Instagram photos. I was like, what? Like no blog post.
And
so
that was probably before Instagram had video.
Yeah. There was no video. There was no
video.
Stories, nothing. So I remember being like, weird. And then it was like as the years progressed, the blog just became, I think in the last like maybe 3 years, I've done 2 sponsored blog posts. Like people just didn't want it anymore. So the focus definitely became more on Instagram. And like, that's when like the Instagram aesthetic was huge, right? So it's like, everything needs to be perfect. Your DSLR cameras, like picture perfect everything, going out to eat just for photos. You know what I mean? So that became the new thing. So it was just trying to keep up with an ever-changing industry. But I remember the like palpable shift from like, we want you to blog. And then they're like, no, we just want photos. And now it's like, if you even get a photo, you're like, oh, you don't want a video? I'm like shocked, you know?
Totally. Also, I distinctly remember how beautifully curated always your feed was. The light pink and the colors.
You were obsessed.
Extremely dedicated to the curation of your feed. It was beautiful.
Oh, thank you. It was exhausting to like have that curation. It was exhausting. I only wore one color.
Yeah.
In my mind, it was like run by the photos and the feed. I'm like, let's go here because I could take a photo here.
Like there's a pink door here.
Feed.
There's a pink.
Oh yeah,
table.
I actually have a list. I probably still have it in notes. It's like defunct now because all these places are closed. But all the places I could go to for photos that had like pink things, I would go to Miami because it was pink, LA because it was pink. Like it was sick. You know what I mean? But it was just. I loved doing it. I thought it was like, I almost found it like I was like a collector. I'm collecting these little like photos to put together. But that was always at the forefront. I had like a little app in my phone where I was always like trying to organize my feed in a way. So then that becomes exhausting. So for me, the shift to video and like the shift to like non-curated and stuff was like such a welcome change because it was too much. I feel like everybody probably just got to be too much. And especially as a consumer of social media, you're like, please, girl, are you like in this restaurant with the flowers, with the, like it's too much. No one's doing that, you know?
Also, I remember when you were having a boy and people were like, is your feed color going to change?
I know.
Yeah, because, right?
Yeah.
Everything had always been pink.
It's so true. It's so funny.
Like, what's it going to be like now?
You know what? I always knew if I was going to have kids, because we didn't know, I was like, if it happens, it happens. But then I was like, okay, we will have one. And I always knew if I was going to have like kids, it would be a boy. I just knew it. But I felt like I was letting a lot of people down because that was the first reaction. They're like, a boy. They're like, no pink? And I was like, no, they'll still be pink. They'll still be pink, you know? But I was like, oh my God. I'm like, how am I going to weave this in? Which is so sick again, like to actually like have these thoughts.
Yeah. It's so
but I remember that too. Yeah. That was, I almost felt disappointed. Like I felt like I was disappointing people. Even though I knew, I felt like I was disappointing people, which is like a very strange reaction to.
Yeah. I mean, probably looking back, you're like,
I know. That's why I was like, I'm so happy, like the very curated stuff. Yeah. But I feel like I almost have like I must have like some of like sort of obsession, because I feel like if that's what's gonna like let me do this still, I'm doing it, you know? Yeah. So it's like, oh, the curated feed is in. I'm like, let's do it. Wear all the pink shit, you know? And now it's like video. I'm like, got it. I'm like, got my little thing. Like, let's do it. Just because I love doing this so much, and I'd love to do it like as long as I can.
Yeah, I love it. I love your videos. You're so funny. You crack me up all the time.
Oh, thank you. You too.
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I feel really grateful and blessed for the group of people I've met, especially like the people who have blogs. I feel like those are relationships that or anyone who's had their blog for, you know, a significant amount of time, they've known for that long. I feel like it just has such a special connection, and you know, it's like we'll always have that. It's
so true, because it was such a strange thing to do at the time, you know? So it's like you almost like, much like funeral services where you're like kind of all in the trenches together, especially like the people who've had a blog for like, well, mine will be almost 10 years old now, and yours is like so old, you know what I mean? So it's like you have like this connection together.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So how old's your son?
He's 3.5 now.
Wow.
Yeah. So cute. Fun age. A lot of work. A lot of like chaos is like how I describe it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. How are you enjoying the baby stage?
It's a tremendous amount of work.
Yes. Yeah.
I love it, of course. But you really don't ever wake up for yourself again.
Never. Unless somebody is watching the baby outside of your own home. That's the only way you'll ever wake up for yourself again.
Yes. That hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
You've never woken up with her not there.
No, the only people that she's with alone are myself or Talia or my mother.
Right.
I don't really, we have a wonderful help, but the help isn't really nanny help. It's basically, you know, more house cleaning help.
Yeah.
Which is great. If you can get any help is great. And in-laws or parents, I mean, you need anybody you can take because
it's so
you need it.
Yeah, especially as they get older. Like I remember when Benny was very little, we didn't have like, my mom would come in to help, but I was like, no, like we got this, we're good. We also lived like but then like life gets more complicated as they get older. We moved into a bigger space. They are like moving around. They need more things. So now Benny, my son, is in full-time childcare. And to me, I was like, oh my gosh, my life compared to like prior. So we only started doing this within the last year. And I'm like, I feel like myself again, you know, which is crazy to say, but it's like you realize how much of yourself is like poured into this human, which is amazing, but you have like no time for yourself. So it's like you need the extra help. And I remember like we never thought we were going to do daycare because we were like, well, you work from home, you'll just take care of him. So I almost felt like I was like, oh, I'm like ashamed that I'm doing this, but like it's the best decision ever.
Yes. Yeah. Once Ariel can talk, I'll feel different.
Yes.
About her being alone with other people.
And that's we waited until he was 18 months to even do like part-time. So he was only in daycare for 2 times a week. And like the daycare is like, they give you photos, they give you like it's so intense. And we never went to daycare as kids. So I'm like, I didn't know how like intense it was. But yeah, it's tough because it's like you need time to yourself, but you also cherish these memories. And now that I look back, he's 3.5 and I look back at the baby stage, I'm like, wow, it went so fast.
Yeah, and you did a lot of the baby stage in COVID.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah.
So when was he born?
So he was born in July of 2019.
Oh, what's his birthday?
July 31st.
Oh, I'm the 18th.
Oh, almost. But yeah, so July, great time for your mom to have had you. I couldn't recommend it enough. Yeah. Summer babies, the best. So I actually feel very blessed because we got a certain amount of time pre-COVID. So I got to experience like a mat leave where you're meeting up with friends and like COVID didn't exist. So I like literally, if somebody wanted to hold him, I'm like, here you go. I took him to events with me. I would like be at events and be like, where is he? I'm like, oh, there he is. Somebody's got him. You know, it was so chilled out. We went to Mexico like literally right before. So we got to do all of that stuff. So I got at least a little taste of that before we went into like heavy lockdown and things got really real. But yeah, I'm happy to, and I'm grateful in that time because we definitely wouldn't have spent as much time together as a family had that not have happened. Mm. However, I am happy to have had him as a newborn prior because my experience, if I were to have him now, would have been totally different than back then. Like I would not be as liberal with people like touching him and holding him, and like it's so different now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you cruise into lockdown with him almost at a year in March. And for his whole first year, so you're age 1 to 2, you're in pandemic mode, which actually is not a bad age, but he's not really socializing.
No.
Right? But it's better than him being a little bit older.
Yeah.
So it's good.
It's true. It's such a like catch-22 because even though it's a lot of work because they're so young, I felt happy. I'm like, this would be impossible with an older child that knew what they were missing out on. Yeah. He was just a baby. He didn't know anything. You know what I mean? So it's like, we went to the park a lot. We would go and like throw sticks at stuff. Like he was just easy to entertain, you know? It was a lot, like it was really full on and you kind of felt like you were going crazy. It's because there was no escape. But at least you didn't have the added layer of like guilt knowing what your child was missing out on because he didn't know, you know? So it was, it was kind of like a blessing and a curse almost.
Yeah, I bet.
Our experience was very different because Sean's daughter was 12.
Oh,
12, 13,
I think that would be so tough.
It was very challenging. And
right.
I mean, it's something that like she's old enough to know what's going on and have to do the remote school. And I feel like that age is it's like those years are so formative and when you're like building relationships with people and you know, socializing. And I feel like I hope that the kids can get over it because it was like really affected.
Totally.
You know?
And we were told
affected
like kids are resilient. But now after having endured that for 2 years, you're like, no, I don't think the kids are okay. Like maybe the kids weren't as resilient as like everybody was saying. And like maybe there should be like some programming or like language or anything to like at least validate like their experience so they can start to heal from it. Yeah. Right? Because that's tough and you saw it firsthand.
Yeah. I hope that never happens again.
Oh my God. Yeah. Me too. Please don't ever happen again. One pandemic for a lifetime is enough. I agree. Yeah. Oh my God. But yeah, life is much better now. Full-time childcare, like getting to go out again. It's so nice, especially like seeing his little relationships form and stuff.
Yeah,
Brian,
he's got friends.
Yes, that's my husband and I. Brian and I always say we're like he's got more friends in the neighborhood than we do. Like he's like, and we're like, who's that? And he's like, and we're like, oh, well, that's nice. I'm like, I don't know anyone. I'm like, so that's nice that you have little friends. So once they start to talk, like the things that come out of their mouth are so funny.
I bet.
Yeah.
You end up with a lot of kids say the darndest things. Probably.
Yeah. It's tough, especially when it comes to like kids and the internet too and like trying to share your life because there are so many videos of him that I'm like, this is so funny. Or like, and I'm not even just from like a mom goggles. I'm like, this is objectively funny. I'm like, I feel like this could go viral on TikTok. I'm like, but don't, because like I don't like the idea of like hundreds of thousands of people like looking at your child, you know? So it's like, that's another layer of parenthood as like a content creator is like trying to like reform boundaries and stuff like that. And it gets like a little harder as they get older.
So looking forward into 2023, out of this whole, long out now, the pandemic, things are picking up.
Yay.
What's exciting?
I'm so excited just to be back and doing things in Toronto. So I'm very lucky to be an ambassador for Destination Toronto. So I get to do a lot of things in the city. So I was just there. We were doing like a wellness roundup. So I got to do all this. I tried other shit for the first time.
How did you like it?
I loved it so much more than I was so afraid. I was like, I didn't even want to take the contract.
I was there last night.
Did you? I loved it. It's so cool.
People think it's like, oh, it's crazy. I would never do that. But it's like, I
thought that.
Yeah. They're like, oh, you're so crazy. I'm like, have you tried it? And it's like, yes, it hurts. And yes, it's hard. But like, you can do hard things.
Totally.
And you feel so good after.
You feel you're like incredible.
I did that. And you feel, it's like, it's mental, it's physical, it's It's so cool. That's
Yeah.
why I'm obsessed.
How long do you stay in for?
Last night I did 90 seconds in the tub because we were in a guided class. So everyone did 90 seconds. And then I went in for another dip for 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
And then last weekend I did a dip with Megan, Youre, and Chloe Wild and some friends. And I was in Lake Ontario for 2.5 minutes. It was so cool.
Our guide told us he goes into Lake Ontario every single day.
It was Tomas.
Yes.
Yeah. He's my friend.
He was, if you can let him know, I'm like, I never ever would have gone into the cold bath had not hit for like his support. He's like very good at what he does.
Yes.
But it's funny to me that like I started the blog and it was like trying to like make Toronto my own city and like connecting with people in my love of Toronto, and still like almost 10 years later, I still get to do that. And that's what excites me the most. Like I just really love living here and I love having like opportunities to explore everything that the city has and like have it be work too. It's like pretty incredible to me.
I love seeing like Solmaz and you doing all kinds of adventures.
Her and I were together.
Also, Elise does a lot of adventures.
Yes, I love Elise's videos. They're so good.
Me too.
Good.
Yeah.
Totally. That's awesome. One of the things I wanted to ask you is like, when it comes to social, I know you make a lot more videos now.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think, I guess, either would be something what would be next in terms of like trends, platforms? Any thoughts on what will be big this year?
So just from what I keep on hearing from TikTok, I think like people just want like storytelling. So it's less about like the curated little clips because it's like, again, like everything comes to like an extreme where now like the videos are getting very curated and stuff. So I think people just want relatability in the mundane, especially as like we head into like rough economic times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think especially now when people say, you know, it's too late. There's already so many people. Everybody's an influencer now. Everybody's a content creator. Be like, well, why not you? You have a story to tell, even if you don't think it's anything remarkable. To somebody it is, or they just feel like you're a comfort to somebody to like see like a little peek into somebody else's life. So I feel like that sort of relatability will be like at the forefront for sure. And same thing, like short form video. I hear long form video is coming back. So like YouTube and everything, blogs. So I don't know. I'm excited to see what's new.
Fantastic. Totally agree with you.
Yeah, me too.
That's definitely on the forefront.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's part of what inspired Cast of Creators too.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome.
So, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was awesome to meet you.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And you just got such a wonderful energy.
Oh, thank you. You guys too. I love being here.
Thank you so much.